The film kicks off with a loud gunshot, and we see a man sprinting, taking cover behind a pillar to avoid bullets. In self-defense, he manages to shoot one of his assailants. Trying to escape, he urgently contacts his getaway driver, who assures him of a prompt arrival. While on the run, the man gets struck by a car. The police show up, causing the getaway driver to leave quickly. Now, we're introduced to Paul, an ordinary guy living with his pregnant wife, Taryn. She's excited about their upcoming baby and urges Paul to finish setting up the nursery. The news reports another unfortunate incident. District Attorney Joshua Gregory is the latest victim in a series of attacks on high-profile individuals. Meanwhile, Paul's phone rings, signaling the beginning of his workday. Upon reaching the hospital, we observe that he's a dedicated nurse, ready for another day of assisting patients. At the crime scene, Detective Eric Masterson investigates, trying to comprehend the events. Lieutenant Regina Lewis joins him, mentioning that she was the first responder and did her best to assist. Masterson attempts to reassure Lewis, noting that Joshua wasn't entirely defenseless. He fired at one of the attackers. While conversing, Detective Jones adds that 2 individuals with gunshot wounds were recently admitted to local hospitals. Armed with this information, the team springs into action to pursue this lead. In the hospital, Abe is severely injured with a concussion, unconscious. Paul notices an open window, and a man enters, launching an attack on him. The intruder seizes Paul's ID card and makes a quick escape. Shortly afterward, Paul provides a statement to Lewis, and they have a brief conversation before she hands him her contact card. Janet, the manager, advises Paul to take the rest of the night off, so he heads home. When he shares what happened with his wife, she becomes somewhat alarmed. While Paul goes to the bathroom, he is unexpectedly struck from behind. The assailant also attacks his wife before returning to render Paul unconscious. Later, Paul wakes up when his phone rings, hearing his wife's terrified screams and sobs. The person on the phone informs Paul that he's become entangled in a situation. He directs Paul to return to the hospital and extract his brother without talking to anyone, or his wife will be in danger. Paul swiftly goes to the hospital, glancing at the card Lewis had given him. He receives a message instructing him to call the number on the card once he leaves. Overwhelmed, Paul feels lightheaded in the bathroom but forces himself to take action. He takes Janet's card and gathers an assortment of medicines into a bag. Leaving calmly, he enters Abe's room, where he notices a police officer keeping watch over the patient. Paul convinces the officer that Abe urgently needs to be taken to the imaging department downstairs, and the officer agrees to accompany them. As they transport Abe down the hallway, the 2 detectives enter the hospital. In the elevator, while the cop is distracted by his phone, Paul directs it to the 3rd underground level. The detectives converse about Abe and his brother, street mercenaries working for someone named Big D, supposedly owing him money. Meanwhile, in the elevator, Paul disconnects a cable, simulating Abe's heart stopping. The officer reaches for a defibrillator, but Paul shocks him instead. The detectives find Abe's room empty. Paul administers adrenaline to Abe, awakening him, followed by morphine. The detectives observe on the cameras that Paul has Abe. Exiting the elevator, Paul and Abe start running, with the detectives in pursuit. They hurry up the stairs and narrowly manage to escape through a gate. When they encounter Mason, Abe accelerates, successfully getting past him. Paul confides in Abe about the threat to his wife and unborn child. Upset, Abe calls his brother, and they arrange a meeting point. Abe insists that his brother, Mateo, must not harm Paul's wife or child. Paul has a brief conversation with his wife on the phone before Mateo reveals his identity. It turns out the brothers are under pressure from Big D. Paul's wife, pretending to be tired, seizes the opportunity to elbow Mateo and attempts to escape. Holding a gun, Mateo warns her not to play games or she'll be in danger. The other pair heads to a location frequented by homeless people, where Paul takes a look at Lewis's card. Meanwhile, Lewis investigates the connection between the 2 brothers and the DA's office. Masterson explains that Mateo faced a 10-year jail term, but Abe had offered the now-deceased Joshua a drive containing evidence against corrupt police officers. Back to a tense situation for Paul. Abe suggests selling his car and advises him to go home. However, Paul disagrees and persists in pursuing Abe. To emphasize his point, he fires a shot near Abe, insisting that Abe come with him. Initially resistant, Abe agrees when he realizes he needs a doctor to avoid collapsing. They head to a station where the brothers plan to meet. Abe warns Mateo about a potential trap, but communication issues prompt Abe to create a diversion. Karen attempts to escape but gets caught by Mateo. The police notice them, and a chase ensues. Karen screams as they maneuver through traffic and speed away. Mateo's driving causes 2 police cars to crash, enabling their escape. Paul and Abe also manage to escape, with Abe requiring another dose of morphine. Out of the blue, Paul is ambushed, but Abe successfully overcomes the attacker at a car wash, taking his radio and police badge, signaling trouble. They are compelled to take a car from an elderly woman, and the detectives are promptly alerted. The police attempt to set traps to intercept them, but without success, leading to a confrontation with the detectives. Paul accelerates the car, following Abe's guidance. Suddenly, they come to a halt, creating a blockade, and make a run for it. Paul decides to head to Pop's, a friend's place, to find refuge and evade capture. Elsewhere, Mateo apologizes to Taryn for involving her, but she expresses concern for herself and her unborn child. Despite her pleas, Mateo doesn't release her and shares the story of how he and his brother have been fending for themselves since childhood. Mateo enters a concealed factory, unaware that he's being followed. Meanwhile, Abe and Paul discuss how Pops was one of Paul's former clients whom he had assisted. At the factory, Mateo informs Taryn that she can leave once Abe arrives. He hides the duffel bag he received from his brother and receives another displeasing message from Big D. Abe and Paul receive approval from Pops and proceed to a person known as Big Cheetah. Abe asks Cheetah for a favor, but Cheetah claims not to have any favors to give. While they talk, Paul charges his phone and receives a call from Mateo. He picks up just as Abe is handed car keys. Spotting Paul on the phone, Abe aims a gun at him, insisting that he talks to his brother. A warning message arrives, and holding Paul at gunpoint, Abe accuses him of being responsible for his wife's death. Simultaneously, the stress of the day triggers Taryn's labor. Meanwhile, the detectives and another officer conduct a raid on a pawn shop. Gunfire erupts, and Paul finds himself cornered by Masterson. Lewis shoots Cheetah and violently confronts an unarmed Abe, demanding the drive. Unable to find it, she seizes Abe's pistol, threatening him and questioning if she'll manipulate this situation similarly to Joshua's murder. Masterson realizes that Lewis is corrupt, responsible for Joshua's death, and framing Abe. Lewis shoots Masterson, concocts a cover story with Jones, and delays the arriving police. Just as Jones is on the verge of executing Abe, Paul intervenes, repeatedly shooting him. Despite being in shock, Paul and Abe manage to escape. Discovering Jones dead, Lewis realizes the severity of her situation. At the factory, Mateo gently lays Taryn down, who insists on needing a hospital for childbirth. Mateo agrees but wants to inform his brother first. As he leaves, he gets shot. A large assailant then begins attacking him while Taryn seeks cover. Mateo fiercely retaliates, but as he becomes overwhelmed, Taryn tries to assist but ends up held at gunpoint. The assailant then shoots Mateo. The scene shifts to Paul, who is losing his composure. Abe attempts to calm him, but Paul is grappling with the fact that he just shot a police officer. Shortly later, they arrive at the factory and come across a trail of blood, leading them to a severely injured Mateo. Using his nursing skills, Paul, along with Abe, does their best to assist him. Mateo discloses that his wife has been taken, and Paul acknowledges the seriousness of Mateo's blood loss. While Mateo struggles to breathe, Abe provides as much comfort as possible until Mateo succumbs. Paul observes this, realizing the brothers were just youngsters trying to navigate the challenging streets together. Meanwhile, the thug who abducted Taryn meets with Lewis, disclosing his status as a corrupt cop. Lewis directs him to eliminate all evidence from the pawn shop and bring Taryn inside. Back with Paul and Abe, Paul stitches up a wound that Abe sustained during the police chase and mentions that he and his wife are expecting a baby boy. Abe retrieves the duffel bag containing the drive and his pistol, prepared to take down every corrupt officer. Despite Paul's efforts to dissuade him, Abe insists it's the sole method to rescue his wife. Paul proposes retrieving the tape from the pawn shop to implicate Lewis. In the warehouse, Taryn is brought in, and Lewis alleges that Paul is accountable for her partner's demise, vowing revenge. Abe and Paul head to a trap house, searching for Big D. A formidable figure emerges, but he doesn't appear as formidable as anticipated. He challenges Abe for showing up while his men are pursuing him. Abe offers the cash from the bag, but Big D deems it inadequate and instructs his men to attack. However, upon opening a flash drive, the men become apprehensive, realizing their exaggerated response. Abe discloses that the drive contains names, addresses, secret bank accounts, and passwords of corrupt cops, which impresses Big D. He invites Abe and Paul inside. Meanwhile, Lewis and her accomplice are erasing evidence at the pawn shop. Observing Taryn, Lewis opts to reach out to Paul. She straightforwardly informs him that his wife is in labor and might not endure for much longer. She provides him with coordinates and an hour to make it there. Big D informs Abe and Paul that his inside source has tipped him off about Paul's wife being held in a building associated with a drug trafficker. Intrigued by the whole narrative, Big D listens as Abe recounts how his brother faced a 10-year sentence, and he negotiated a deal, the drive in exchange for his brother's freedom, necessitating a personal handover. Abe reminisces about discovering Joshua dead and narrowly escaping through a window. The pair is then outfitted with police uniforms, with Big D asserting that they're now deputized. He and his men set out, with Big D orchestrating the operation as if directing a movie. Paul notifies Lewis upon reaching the specified location. Big D stages a dramatic scene involving a car being pushed down the street, ignited with a Molotov cocktail, and colliding with a police car, resulting in an explosion near a police station. Paul dials 911 to report the fire, prompting police to head to the scene. Big D directs one of his men to capture the money shot. As Lewis approaches the fiery spectacle, an ambulance also arrives, indicating the cue for Paul and Abe to take action. Amid the commotion, Taryn seizes the opportunity to escape and conceals herself in the building. Using the chaos as a shield, Paul and a pretended injured Abe infiltrate the police station. They navigate the hallways, while Taryn is discovered and roughly handled by the corrupt officer. Lewis enters the police station but is swiftly confronted by Abe, who holds her at gunpoint and disarms her. Meanwhile, Paul rushes toward the sound of his wife's cries and engages in a physical altercation with the corrupt cop. Initially struggling, Paul eventually succeeds in stabbing the cop with a syringe. He rushes to his wife, while Abe compels Lewis to the ground. Lewis passionately talks about the depth of corruption, unaware that Abe had secretly recorded her in her office. This realization dawns on her as she continues her rant, only to be silenced by a forceful kick from Abe. Outside, Big D's associate announces the capture of crucial footage, signaling the conclusion of his involvement. Nearby, news reporters report on the unfolding scene. Abe approaches one of them, handing over the hidden camera and finally allowing himself a moment of relief and a smile. Back inside, Taryn is in the midst of giving birth. Lewis regains consciousness, sees her own face on the news broadcast, and notices a pistol nearby. As she reaches for the gun, police officers swarm the room. Trying to shoot, she gets shot down by the officers. Jump ahead 1 year, and Paul is savoring a lighthearted moment with his son, marking the child's first birthday. They present the birthday cake, and Paul receives a heartfelt message from Abe. The trio poses for a family photo. The focus then shifts to Abe, driving and smiling while glancing at the picture of the birthday cake, content in the moment. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell if you want to watch more videos like this. Thank you for watching and see you again soon. Take care.